Story 1. I need you to understand something before I start. I am not someone who believes easily. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, fourth-generation Texan. My family has roots in this state that go back to before it was even a state. We are practical people, hard-working people, people who believe in what they can see and touch and prove. So when I tell you what I know about the Alamo, I need you to understand that I am not telling you a ghost story. I am telling you a history. And the history is what makes everything else impossible to dismiss. The Alamo. 300 Alamo Plaza, San Antonio, Texas, in the middle of one of the most visited tourist districts in the entire state. Surrounded by hotels and restaurants and souvenir shops, millions of people walk past it every single year. Most of them stop, take a photograph, maybe go inside for 20 minutes, and then move on with their day. They have no idea what they are standing on. Most people know the broad outline of the Alamo's history. February and March of 1836, a group of Texan defenders held the Alamo mission against the Mexican army under General Santa Anna for 13 days. On the morning of March 6th, the Mexican army breached the walls. The battle lasted approximately 90 minutes. When it was over, every Texan defender inside the Alamo was dead. Between 180 and 250 men, depending on which historical account you consult, dead inside those walls in a single morning. But here is what most people don't know. Here is what the tourist brochures don't mention. The bodies of the Texan defenders were not buried. Santa Anna ordered them burned.
Their remains were piled outside the Alamo walls in 2 separate funeral pyres and set alight. The ashes and bone fragments were left where they fell. Some were scattered into the San Antonio River.
Some were buried in shallow, unmarked graves around the building. Some, according to historical accounts from the period, were simply left on the ground
to become part of the earth of San Antonio. Think about that for a moment. 200 men, burned, unburied. Their remains scattered across the ground that is now a tourist plaza. The ground you are standing on when you take that photograph.
The reports from the Alamo began almost immediately after the battle. Mexican soldiers stationed there in the weeks following reported seeing figures on the walls at night. Armed figures, standing watch. Santa Anna himself, according to accounts from members of his staff, ordered the Alamo demolished after the battle. His engineers went to carry out the order and came back without completing it. They reported that the walls were guarded, not by living men, by something they could not explain. Santa Anna did not push the issue. The Alamo was not demolished. It stands today exactly where it stood in 1836. The modern reports begin in the late 1800s, when San Antonio took possession of the building and began using it as a police storage facility. Officers assigned to guard it at night requested transfers in numbers that became impossible to ignore. Officer after officer, in separate reports written in careful official language, described the same thing. Figures on the walls. Armed, standing watch, exactly as the Mexican soldiers had described them 50 years earlier. One officer, a man named Callahan who served with the San Antonio police in 1894, filed a report preserved in the city archives. He described hearing footsteps on the roof of the building. Heavy, deliberate. The footsteps of a man in boots walking a patrol. He climbed up to investigate. The roof was empty.
He climbed back down. The footsteps resumed the moment his feet touched the ground. He stood at the base of the building and listened to those footsteps, walking the same patrol route for 2 hours. He wrote in his report, in language remarkable for its restraint, that he believed the Alamo was occupied by something that had not received word that the battle was over.
In 1936? Exactly 100 years after the battle, a ceremony was held at the Alamo. A photographer was hired to document the event. In 17 of his photographs, behind the living people attending the ceremony, there are figures. Not transparent. Not blurry. Solid figures. In clothing that matches descriptions of what the Texan defenders wore in 1836. Standing against the walls. Watching. Those photographs are held in the collection of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. They have never been officially explained. The last person who spoke to me about the Alamo was a woman named Teresa.
She had worked there for 14 years as a historian and curator. She told me about a morning in March of 2019, March 6th specifically, the anniversary of the final battle. She arrived at 5 a.m, alone. She walked through the chapel and stopped because the air had changed. A density, a presence, like walking into a room full of people, except the room was empty.
Story 2. This story is about something older than any battle, older than any building. This story is about a place where the land itself has never been right. The Marfa Lights, Marfa, Texas, Presidio County, West Texas Desert, 450 miles west of San Antonio. The Marfa Lights have been reported since at least 1883, when a rancher named Robert Ellison first described seeing mysterious lights moving in the desert south of Marfa, near the Chinati Mountains. He assumed they were Apache campfires. He rode out to investigate. There were no campfires. There were no people. There was nothing. The scientific investigations began in the 20th century. Geologists, physicists, atmospheric scientists, military researchers. Every investigation reached the same conclusion. We cannot explain what these lights are. The leading scientific theory, piezoelectric discharge from the quartz-bearing rocks in the Chinati Mountains, cannot account for the movement of the lights. Rocks do not produce light that moves, that changes direction, that separates into multiple points and then rejoins, that responds to other lights. A researcher named David spent 11 months in and around Marfa in the early 2000s. He was a graduate student in atmospheric physics. He came with instruments, with recording equipment, with a completely rational scientific framework. He left 11 months later with something he has never been able to reconcile with that framework. He told me about a night in his 4th month there. He had set up his equipment on a ridge 3 miles south of the official viewing area, closer to the Chinati Mountains, in the actual desert. The lights appeared, not in the distance, closer than he had ever seen them, maybe half a mile away. He started his instruments. He started recording.
And then he did something that the locals had told him never to do. He turned on his high-powered spotlight and directed it at the lights. The lights stopped for approximately 30 seconds, completely still. Then they went out. Then his spotlight went out. Not the battery. He checked. The battery was fully charged. The switch was in the on position. The bulb was intact. The spotlight simply was not working. He sat in complete darkness in the West Texas desert for 20 minutes. Then he heard something. Movement in the desert brush around him. Close. Circling. Not an animal. This was deliberate. The sound of something moving in a slow circle around his position that did not want him to know exactly where it was.
He packed his equipment in the dark. He walked back to his truck by memory. He drove back to Marfa. He sat in his motel room until sunrise. When he went back the following morning, he found his spotlight, working perfectly, but pointing in a different direction than he had aimed it, pointing south, toward the Chinati Mountains, as if something had picked it up while he was gone, examined it, and set it back down, pointing at whatever was out there in the dark. He said that in the 20 minutes he sat in the dark, he had the overwhelming certainty that whatever was in that desert with him.
Story 3. This story is about a road, a specific stretch of road in the Texas Hill Country. Ader Road, Coryell County, Texas. Central Texas. Rolling limestone hills covered in cedar and live oak. Land that has been worked by the same families for 150 years. The Tonkawa people who inhabited this region before European settlement had specific beliefs about this area. They considered it a boundary place, where the world of the living and the world of the dead came close together. They did not camp here. They passed through it quickly if they had to, and they did not pass through it at night. A farming family named the Hendersons settled on a property adjacent to what would eventually become Ader Road in 1871. Their journals, donated to the Coryell County Historical Archive by their descendants in 1962, contain entries beginning in 1873. The father wrote in November of 1873, "I went to the creek bed again last night with my rifle. I found nothing. The voices stopped when I arrived and resumed when I returned to the house. I do not know what to make of this." He made 37 entries about the voices over the next 4 years. His wife made her own entries. Their eldest son made entries in his own separate journal. 3 separate people, 3 separate records, all describing the same thing. Voices from the creek bed at night that stopped when approached, that resumed when you walked away. In 1987, a couple named Gary and Linda were driving home late at night on Ader Road. It was past midnight. There was a woman standing in the middle of the road in a white dress, standing completely still, facing the car. Gary stopped the vehicle about 50 feet from her. He started to open his door. Linda grabbed his arm. She told him not to get out. She said she didn't know why. She just knew. They sat in the car with the headlights on the woman in white for approximately 40 seconds. The woman did not move, did not react to the headlights at all. Then Linda said very quietly,
that she could see through her. Not completely, but enough. The cedar trees behind the woman were faintly visible through the white of her dress.
Gary put the car in reverse. He reversed down Ader Road for a quarter mile before turning around and driving away. The deputy who took their report the following morning told them quietly that they were not the first, that reports from that stretch of Ader Road went back further than his records did, that the woman in white had been seen by more people than he could count, always in the same location, always facing whatever vehicle was approaching, always partially visible through. The deputy told them one more thing. The people who had walked toward her all reported the same thing. The closer you got, the colder the air became, until at a certain point, the cold stopped you physically, like walking into a wall. Story 4. Not every haunted place in Texas is famous. Not every haunted place has a viewing platform, or a historical plaque, or a Wikipedia page. Some of the most deeply disturbing places in this state are places most people have never heard of. Places that exist quietly, in plain sight, doing ordinary things, while something extraordinary moves through them. In the 1920s and 1930s, Mineral Wells was famous for its mineral water. People came from across the country to drink it, to bathe in it, to take cures at the sanitariums and hotels that had sprung up around the natural springs. The Baker Hotel opened in 1929. 14 stories, over 400 rooms. The most grand and luxurious building for hundreds of miles in any direction. Celebrities came, presidents came. Judy Garland performed there. Clark Gable stayed there. Will Rogers was a regular guest. And then the mineral water craze ended. The sanitariums closed. The tourists stopped coming. Mineral wells declined. The Baker Hotel closed in 1972 and sat for over 50 years, empty, decaying. 14 stories of crumbling plaster and broken windows and dark hallways, in the middle of a small Texas town that time had largely forgotten. The stories about the Baker Hotel center on several specific presences, but the most consistent, the one that has been reported by the most separate, unconnected people, involves a woman on the 7th floor. She is known locally as the Lady of the Baker. The story most commonly told about her is that she was the mistress of a hotel manager in the 1930s, that the relationship ended badly, that she died in the hotel, either by accident or by her own hand, depending on which version of the story you hear. The historical record does not confirm a specific death of this kind, but the historical record of the Baker Hotel is incomplete. Hotels in the 1930s did not always document the things that happened inside them, especially the things that were bad for business. What is documented are the reports from the urban explorers who began entering the building in the 1980s, from the paranormal researchers who have spent nights in the building over the decades, from the construction workers who began renovation work on the Baker in recent years. All of them. Every single person who has spent significant time on the 7th floor of the Baker Hotel has reported the same thing. A woman standing in the hallway, always at the far end, always facing toward you, always still. A construction worker named Marcus, who was part of the renovation crew in 2020, told me about his third week on the job. He was working alone on the 7th floor, stripping old wallpaper from a section of corridor. He had been working for about 2 hours when he became aware. The way you become aware of something without seeing it directly, that he was not alone. He turned around. She was standing at the end of the corridor, about 30 feet away. He described her as completely solid, not transparent, not blurry. A woman in clothing from a different era. Dark dress, dark hair, standing absolutely still, looking directly at him. He said later that his first thought was that someone had gotten into the building, that this was a trespasser. He called out. The woman did not respond. He took 3 steps toward her. She was gone. Not gone like she walked away. Gone like a candle flame in a sudden wind. Present one second, absent the next. He went back to work. He told himself it was a trick of the light. Bad lighting, tired eyes. He worked for another hour. Then he heard it. A sound from the room beside him. The sound of a woman crying. Soft. Story 5. There is a cemetery in Austin, Texas, that most Austinites have never heard of. It sits in the middle of the city, surrounded on all sides by development. Houses, businesses, roads, a completely ordinary urban landscape in every direction, except for this one piece of ground. Oakwood Cemetery, 1601 Navasota Street, East Austin. Established in 1839, one of the oldest cemeteries in the state of Texas, and one of the most persistently reported locations of unexplained activity in the entire city. Oakwood Cemetery holds the remains of some of the most significant figures in Texas history: governors, senators, Civil War generals, the founders of institutions that still exist. But it also holds something else. In a separate section of the cemetery, segregated even in death as they were in life, are the graves of thousands of enslaved people and freedmen, many with no markers. Many with markers so worn that the names are gone. Many with nothing to indicate that a person of significance and worth was placed in this ground. The reports from Oakwood Cemetery are as old as the cemetery itself. The earliest residents of Austin described seeing lights in the cemetery at night, moving slowly between the headstones, not carried by anyone, just moving on their own through the dark. But the reports that have accumulated in the modern era are more specific and more disturbing. A woman named Carolyn began visiting Oakwood Cemetery in 2014. She was researching her family history. Her great-great-grandmother was buried in the freedmen section. She had a name and an approximate date, but no marker. She spent weeks walking that section of the cemetery, searching. She told me about a Wednesday afternoon in October of 2014. She was alone in the freedmen section. Late afternoon,
The light was going golden and low. She was crouching down, examining a partially buried stone, when she heard a child laugh. She looked up. The cemetery was empty. She looked in every direction. No one. She went back to examining the stone. The laugh came again, right beside her ear, as if a child was kneeling next to her, looking at what she was looking at, and finding something about it delightful.
She did not feel afraid. She said later that was what surprised her most. She expected fear. She felt instead something she described as the presence of joy. Uncomplicated and complete. The kind of joy that children have, that adults have mostly forgotten. She visited the cemetery every week for the next 2 years. She heard the child laugh on 11 more occasions. Always in the Freedmen's section. Always when she was searching for something. Always right beside her. As if the child was helping.
She eventually found her great-great-grandmother's grave. A small stone. Half buried. The name almost entirely worn away, but legible if you looked long enough. She brushed the stone clean. She sat beside it for a long time.
Story 6. This story involves a school. Not an abandoned school. Not a closed institution. A functioning school that has been educating children for over 100 years. And that has been the site of reports from students, teachers, and administrators that have never been officially acknowledged, but that have never stopped. Seguin High School, Seguin, Texas, Guadalupe County, about 30 miles east of San Antonio. A small city with a long history, and an old school building that contains more of that history than most people realize.
The school was built in 1916 on land that had served various institutional purposes since the mid-1800s. The original structure still stands, incorporated into the modern campus. Old stone walls inside newer construction. The kind of building where you can feel the layers of time if you walk slowly enough. The reports center on the old East Wing, the original 1916 structure, the section of the building that has been repurposed multiple times over the decades, used as classrooms, storage, administrative offices, but never demolished, never fully separated from the rest of the school.
Students have reported seeing a figure in the East Wing hallway for as long as anyone can remember. A teacher, in clothing from an earlier era, standing in the hallway between classes, watching the students pass, not interacting, not speaking, just watching, with the calm authority of someone who has been doing exactly this for a very long time. A teacher named Mr. Reyes, who taught at Seguin High for 22 years, from 1985 to 2007, told me about his own experience. He had been at the school for about 3 years when it happened. He was staying late one evening to grade papers. He was the only teacher left in that section of the building. He was working in his classroom, which was adjacent to the East Wing hallway, when he heard footsteps. Slow, measured. The footsteps of someone walking a familiar route. He assumed it was a custodian. He went to his door and looked out. The hallway was empty. The footsteps continued, right past where he was standing. He could feel the displacement of air as whatever was walking passed within 2 feet of him. He could not see anything, but he could feel the passage of something, moving steadily down the hallway, with the unhurried confidence of someone who had every right to be there.
He went back to his desk. He graded his papers. He went home. He told his wife. His wife told him that her own mother, who had attended Sagan High in the 1950s, had told her the exact same story. 40 years earlier. The same hallway, the same footsteps, the same feeling of something passing close that you could not see, but absolutely could not deny.
Story 7. The next story takes us to a part of Texas that most people outside the state have never heard of. Deep East Texas, the Piney Woods, a part of the state that feels like a different world from the deserts and plains that most people associate with Texas. Dense forest, tall pines, red clay soil, creek bottoms full of cypress trees, a landscape that feels ancient and enclosed and full of secrets. Bragg Road, Hardin County, Texas, also known locally as Ghost Road or Light Road, an 8-mile dirt track running through the Big Thicket National Preserve, one of the most biologically diverse ecosystems in North America. The light that appears on Bragg Road has been reported since the early 1900s, before the road was even a road, when it was still a railroad right-of-way, used by trains running through the Big Thicket. The most common local explanation for the light is a story. A railroad worker, killed on the tracks in the early 1900s, searching for his head. The light is his lantern, moving through the dark. It is a story. It may or may not be true, but the light is real. Thousands of people have seen the Bragg Road light over the past century. It appears as a single glowing orb, sometimes white, sometimes yellow, sometimes with a reddish tint, moving down the road at varying speeds, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, sometimes disappearing and reappearing. Scientists have investigated. The most widely cited explanation is automobile headlights refracting through the trees from a highway some distance away. This explanation has problems. The light was reported decades before that highway existed, and the light appears on nights when no traffic is present on the highway in question. And the light does things that refracted headlights cannot do. It stops, it turns, it approaches people who are standing on the road, and then withdraws, as if it has looked at what it found, and decided it is not what it was looking for. A man named James grew up in Hardin County. He told me about the night he and 3 friends drove Bragg Road in 1998. They were teenagers, looking for the light, treating it as an adventure. They drove to the midpoint of the road and parked, turned off the engine, turned off the headlights, and waited. After about 20 minutes, the light appeared, about half a mile down the road ahead of them, low to the ground, moving slowly toward the car. James said nobody spoke. All 4 of them sat completely still and watched the light approach. It came within about 100 yards of the car and stopped. It sat there for a long time, perfectly still, as if examining the car from a distance. Then it went out. The 4 of them sat in silence for almost a minute. Then James's friend in the back seat said very quietly, "It's behind us now." They turned around. The light was directly behind the car, 10 feet from the rear window, not moving, just present, close enough that it cast a faint glow into the interior of the car, close enough that they could see there was nothing producing it, no source, no object, no body, just light, hanging in the air of Bragg Road at night, looking at them. James started the car and drove out of there. He has been back to Bragg Road many times since. He lives in Hardin County still. He has seen the light many more times, but he said that first night, when the light appeared behind the car, he felt something he has never been able to adequately describe. Not fear, not exactly, more like the feeling of being recognized by something that had been waiting on that road for a very long time, and had finally found, not what it was looking for, but something interesting enough to come close. Story 8. This story is about a courthouse, a working courthouse, where real cases are heard, where real judges sit, where real people walk in and out every day on the business of justice and law, and where something has been present in the upper floors for longer than anyone currently working there has been alive. Oh, the Ellis County Courthouse, Waxahachie, Texas, about 30 miles south of Dallas, built in 1895. One of the most architecturally beautiful courthouses in the entire state. Red sandstone and granite, a clock tower rising over the town square, Romanesque arches, and elaborate stone carvings covering every surface. A building designed to announce permanence, authority, the weight of institutional power. What most people don't know about the Ellis County Courthouse is the story carved into its stone. Literally. Look closely at the stone carvings on the upper exterior of the building. The decorative faces carved into the sandstone around the arches and windows. They are not generic architectural details. They tell a story. The stonemason who carved them, a craftsman brought from Germany specifically for this project, fell in love with a local woman while he was working on the building. Her name was Mabel. She did not return his feelings. He carved her face into the stone of the building. Beautiful, serene, looking out over the town. And then, as the rejection deepened, as whatever relationship he had imagined failed to materialize, the faces he carved changed. They became angry, grotesque, distorted. Some of them are barely human, twisted expressions of anguish and rage and something that looks disturbingly like madness. Carved in permanent stone on a public building by a man whose feelings had nowhere else to go. The stonemason finished the building, left Waxahachie, was never heard from again. But something of what he felt, the intensity of it, the violence of it, carved permanently into stone. The reports from the upper floors of the Ellis County Courthouse, particularly the area around the clock tower, go back to the early 1900s. County employees who worked late, cleaners doing overnight work, security personnel doing rounds, all reporting the same thing. A feeling in the upper floors that has no rational explanation. A heaviness, a pressure, like the building is aware of you. Like the faces in the stone are doing more than just looking. A county clerk named Susan, who worked in the building for 18 years, described what happened to her on a Tuesday night in November of 2008. She was working late on a filing deadline. She was alone in her office on the 3rd floor. She heard someone walking in the hallway. She assumed it was a security guard. She got up to ask him something about the building being locked. She opened her office door. The hallway was empty. She looked in both directions. Nothing. She started to close her door. She had walked past that face every working day for 18 years. She had stopped seeing it the way you stop seeing things that are always there. But that night, she looked at it, and she said it was looking back. Not in the way stone looks at things, in a different way. In the way that something looks at you when it has been waiting patiently for you to finally notice it. She went back inside her office. She finished her filing. She went home. She told no one. She told me 17 years later that she has never looked at that face again. Every day for the remaining years of her career, she walked into and out of that building without looking up, because she knows if she looks, it will be looking back. Story 9. This story happened in 2016. Not 100 years ago, not in a crumbling abandoned building, in a house, a normal house, in a normal suburb of Houston, Texas, a house that a family moved into expecting nothing except a place to live, and found something they were entirely unprepared for. The family, I will call them the Garcias, moved into a 3-bedroom house in Katy, Texas, a suburb west of Houston, in the spring of 2016. They had 2 children, a daughter named Sophia, who was 9, a son named Marco, who was 6, both completely ordinary kids, neither prone to imagination or dramatic behavior. The first thing they noticed was the dog. They had a 4-year-old Labrador named Duke. Duke was a calm, confident animal, never anxious, never aggressive, never frightened by anything. Within 1 week of moving into the house, Duke refused to go into the hallway that connected the 2 children's bedrooms. He would stand at the entrance to the hallway, look down it, and walk away. Not frightened exactly, more like decided. Like he had looked down that hallway and made a clear and final choice not to go there. The parents noticed. They thought it was an adjustment issue. A new house, new smells. He would settle in. He never settled in. For the entire time the family lived in that house, Duke never entered that hallway. Not once. 2 weeks after they moved in, Sophia told her mother that she had a friend. Her mother assumed she meant a school friend. She asked about the friend. Sophia said she lived in the house. She said her name was Anna. She said Anna was very sad. She said Anna had been in the house for a long time and was very happy that Sophia was there now. Her mother asked what Anna looked like. Sophia described a girl, her own age, brown hair, a dress that was not like clothes kids wore now. Her mother asked where Anna was. Sophia pointed down the hallway. The hallway Duke would not enter. The parents researched the history of the house. They found that the house had been built in 1987. They found that in 1994, a 9-year-old girl had died in the house. An accident. A fall. They did not tell Sophia any of this. That evening, Sophia came to her mother and said Anna was very upset. Her mother asked why. Sophia said Anna didn't want them to know about her. She said knowing about her made things different. She said Anna had liked being a secret. The mother called a priest, who came and walked through the house. After he left, Sophia said Anna was gone. She was sad about it. She said Anna had not wanted to go. The Garcias lived in that house for another 2 years. Duke never entered that hallway. Sophia never mentioned Anna again, not once, not in any way. As if that friendship had ended so completely that even the memory of it had been taken. The mother told me this story in 2022, 6 years after it happened. She said the thing that still disturbs her most is not anything that happened in the house. It is one specific moment. The moment when Sophia pointed down that hallway and said the name Anna, and Duke, who was standing beside them, looked down that hallway and whimpered once and walked away, as if the name alone was confirmation of something he had known all along. Story 10. Most people who visit San Antonio know the Riverwalk, the famous stretch of restaurants and hotels and tourist attractions along the San Antonio River. A beautiful, lively, festive place full of people and lights and music. But there is a section of the San Antonio River that is not on the tourist maps, a section that runs through an older part of the city, away from the hotels, away from the lights, a section that the city has never quite managed to make cheerful, no matter how many times it has tried. The area around Nueva Street and the old Spanish governor's palace, the oldest surviving government building in Texas, built in 1722 by the Spanish colonial government, used continuously since then for purposes that have not always been benign. The Spanish colonial government was not gentle. The history of what happened in and around this building in the 1720s and 1730s involves the suppression of the native population of the region, forced labor, violence that the records describe in terms that tell you immediately that the people writing those records did not consider all of the people involved to be equally human. The building is now a museum, a carefully preserved example of Spanish colonial architecture. Visited by school groups and history enthusiasts, the courtyard is pleasant in the afternoon light. The well in the center of the courtyard is surrounded by explanatory plaques, but the well has its own history, one that the plaques do not mention. During the colonial period, the well was used for more than water. What exactly it was used for, the records are deliberately vague. But local historians who have studied the original Spanish documents have described finding references to the well that they found deeply troubling. References that suggest the well was a repository for things that the colonial administration wanted to disappear. The reports from the Spanish governor's palace center on the courtyard, the well specifically. Visitors who stand too close to the well for too long report a feeling of sudden and profound unease, not general unease, specific, directed. Like the unease comes from the well itself, like something at the bottom of that old stone shaft knows you are standing above it and does not want you there. A museum volunteer named Patricia, who had given tours at the Spanish governor's palace for 6 years, told me about a school group she was leading in March of 2018. Third graders, 22 children, completely normal school field trip. She was explaining the history of the courtyard. The children were gathered around the well.
She was mid-sentence when every single child went silent. Not the silence of children listening. The silence of children frightened. 22 8-year-olds standing around the well, all of them looking at the same point, below the rim, into the darkness of the shaft. Patricia stopped talking. She looked at the well. She saw nothing. She asked the children what they were looking at. None of them answered. They just stared for about 15 seconds. Then one girl turned to Patricia and said very quietly,
Patricia moved the group
"There's
away
someone
from
down
the well.
there."
She redirected the tour. She finished the visit. She put the children back on their bus. She went back to the courtyard alone. She stood at the well. She looked down. She heard something from below. Faint. Like the sound of someone breathing. Very slowly. In a space that was too small. She stepped back from the well and walked inside the building and sat down in the director's office and did not speak for 10 minutes.
She still volunteers at the palace, but she no longer takes tour groups to the courtyard. She tells her supervisor it is because the outdoor space is too loud for groups. She has never told her supervisor the real reason. She told me because I asked. And because she said she felt someone should know that whatever is at the bottom of that well is still there and is aware of everyone who stands above it. Story 11. This story is recent. It happened in 2021 to a man named Thomas, who is an engineer, who works for an oil company in Midland, Texas, who would like me to make very clear that he is not the kind of person who tells stories like this. He is telling it because he cannot explain it. And because not telling it, he said, has begun to feel dishonest. Thomas was driving back to Midland from a job site in far west Texas. Late October, after dark. U.S. Highway 67 through the Permian Basin, one of the loneliest stretches of road in the continental United States. Flat. Dark. The nearest town sometimes 50 or 60 miles in any direction. The kind of road where you can drive for an hour and see nothing except the pavement ahead and the stars above.
He had been driving for about 2 hours when he saw the man on the road. Not on the shoulder. On the road. Standing in the right lane. Facing Thomas's truck. Thomas slowed. He had his high beams on. The man was clearly visible. Middle-aged, work clothes, standing absolutely still in the middle of the lane. Thomas assumed a breakdown. A car off the road somewhere. Someone who had been walking for help. He slowed to a stop about 40 feet from the man. He rolled down his window.
He called out, "You need help?" The man did not respond, did not move, did not react in any way to the truck or the headlights or Thomas's voice. Thomas turned on his interior light. He looked more carefully at the man and realized that the man was not casting a shadow. The high beams of Thomas's truck were illuminating everything in front of him. The road, the scrubby desert vegetation on both sides, everything had a clear shadow behind it. The man had none. Thomas sat in his truck for what he believes was about 2 minutes, looking at a man standing in the middle of Highway 67, who cast no shadow, who made no movement, who gave no indication that he was aware of the truck or the lights or anything else. Thomas put his truck in reverse, backed up until he had enough room, pulled around the man, and drove. He did not look in his mirrors. He drove for 20 miles before he stopped. He sat in a gas station parking lot, called his wife, told her he was running late, did not tell her why. He told me why. 3 years later. He said the drive from that point to Midland, about an hour and a half, is completely blank in his memory. He knows he drove it. He arrived home. His wife confirmed he seemed normal. But the hour and a half between the gas station and his driveway is simply not in his memory. Like a section of tape, cleanly removed.
He had the truck checked the following week. The odometer showed the correct mileage. He had driven the right distance and approximately the right time. Nothing was wrong with the truck. Nothing was wrong with him physically. Just that hour and a half. Gone. Clean. As if whatever was standing on Highway 67 that night took something with it when Thomas drove away. Something small enough that he has only noticed its absence in the dreams he now has, several times a week, of a man standing in the dark on an empty road with no shadow, watching him sleep.
Story 12. The last story is the one that has stayed with me the longest. Not because it is the most dramatic, not because it involves the most famous location, but because of what it suggests about the nature of the places we have been talking about tonight. About what it means when a place holds on to something. About what that something might actually be. Port Arthur, Texas. Jefferson County. Southeast Texas. On the Gulf Coast. A port city with a long industrial history. Oil refineries. Chemical plants. The smell of industry in the air on certain days. A working city. A practical city. Not a place associated with the supernatural. Not a place on any ghost tour itinerary. But in the older residential neighborhoods of Port Arthur, away from the refineries and the port facilities, there were streets that have been there since the early 1900s. Old houses, old trees, old families who have lived on the same blocks for generations. And on one of those streets, in a house that has been in the same family since 1923, something has been present for as long as any living member of that family can remember. The family's name is Thibodeau. Cajun heritage, Catholic, practical people who work hard and believe in God and do not have time for nonsense. The presence in the Thibodeau house has never been frightening. This is the first thing every member of the family says when they describe it. It has never been frightening. It has been consistent. It is an old man, seen by every generation of the family since the 1940s, sitting in the front room, in the chair by the window, looking out at the street. He is not always there, but he is there often enough that the family stopped being surprised by him decades ago. Children grow up in the Thibodeau house seeing the old man in the chair. They are told by their parents, that is just great-grandpa. He is not the actual great-grandfather. The actual great-grandfather died in 1951. But somewhere along the line, the family decided that this is who it is. An ancestor. Someone who loved this house so much that he simply never left. A woman named Claire is the current owner of the house. She is in her 60s. She grew up in it. She inherited it from her parents. She has raised her own children in it. She plans to leave it to her daughter. She told me about the morning after her mother died. Her mother passed away in a hospital, not at home. Claire came home in the early morning hours. She walked into the front room. The old man was in the chair, which was not unusual. But this time, he turned and looked at her. He had never done that before. In all the years she had seen him, in all the years her parents had seen him, in all the years her grandparents had described him, he had always been looking out the window, at the street, always away from the people in the room. This time he turned and looked directly at Claire. And she said his expression was not frightening. It was not threatening. It was not strange. It was the expression of someone who has been in a house for a very long time, who has watched a family grow and diminish and grow again, who has seen the people in this house come in at the end of difficult days, and who understands, because he has watched it so many times, exactly what kind of night Claire has just had. It was the expression of someone who wanted her to know she was not alone, that the house that held her had held many people before her and would hold many after, and that whatever had kept him in that chair by that window for 70 years was not something dark or broken or
the
unresolved.
Particular quality of light
It was
that comes
simply
through that window on certain
love.
mornings. For the life
For a place
that has moved through those rooms for
family.
100 years. He looked at her for about 5 seconds. Then he turned back to the window and was gone. She has not seen him since. Neither has her daughter. Neither has anyone in the family in the years since her mother died. She told me she's not sure what to make of that. She said the house feels the same. Warm, familiar. The house of a family that has been in one place for a long time. But the chair by the window?
is empty now. And she said, some mornings, she sits in the front room with her coffee.
And looks at that empty chair and feels something she cannot name. Not grief exactly, not fear. Something closer to the feeling you have when someone has been taking care of you for your entire life, and you only realize it the moment they are gone. 12 places, 1 state. The Alamo, where 200 men have stood watch for nearly 2 centuries. The Marfa Desert, where something ancient and curious moves through the darkness. Ader Road, where a woman in white stands at the boundary between the living and the dead. The Baker Hotel, where a woman grieves in a 7th-floor corridor. Oakwood Cemetery, where a child waited 60 years to help someone find a forgotten grave.
Seguin High School, where a teacher still walks the hallways long after their last class. Bragg Road, where a light looks for something it has never found. The Ellis County Courthouse, where faces carved in stone have never stopped watching. A house in Katy, where a 9-year-old girl waited 22 years for a friend. The Spanish Governor's Palace, where something at the bottom of a well knows you are there. Highway 67, where a man with no shadow takes something from the people who see him. And a house in Port Arthur, where an old man sat by a window for 70 years because he loved a place and the people in it too much to leave. Texas does not let go of its dead. And its dead do not let go of Texas. If you take one thing from these 12 stories, let it be this. The places we live in, the places we work.
Most of the time, that history stays quiet. Most of the time, you walk through a place and feel nothing except the present moment. But sometimes, in certain places, at certain hours, the history surfaces. And something that has been held in those walls, in that ground, in the air of a room, for decades or centuries, makes itself known. Not always to frighten you, not always to warn you, sometimes just to remind you that the world is older than you are, that more has happened in the places you move through every day than you will ever fully know, and that you are never quite as alone as you think you are.